Welcome to the Book Bungalow's virtual author event featuring Matthew Medney and John Connelly, co-authors of the first novel in a brand new science fiction series, Beyond Kuiper, the Galactic Star Alliance. My name is Tanya Mills, and I'm the owner and manager of the Book Bungalow in St. George, Utah, Southern Utah's only independent bookstore, offering all new books and a full range of events. While we're open and taking precautions, particularly now because we're spiking in Utah like so many other places are around the country, we're still doing our events virtually and probably will through the end of the year, if not beyond. Beyond Kuiper is an illustrated, it's a novel, but it has some illustrations interspersed throughout. I was going to show you that. I'll wait on that. I'll be posting the link to order this book. In fact, I posted it already in the chat room. And as well as a link to Matt's website where you can learn more about his other projects. I didn't have a link. I don't know if you have a website, John. Do you?
No, not one personally.
Okay, all right.
Not yet.
Anyway, I will include both the book order and website link at the end of our recording before I post it to our YouTube channel this weekend, and I'll send you all, those of you who are here, a follow-up email that has all those links. And Matt, do you have a copy of the book to show us? Because it doesn't come out, I'm getting two different reports on my Ingram. I order my books through Ingram. It's not out till November 24th, but I saw somewhere else that it's already out. Is it just out in ebook version?
So it's out in ebook. It's out in ebook and it's out in Audible, and some comic book shops have it right now. Okay. It was the mistake that our distributor also does comics, okay. And they put it when you solicit to a comic book shop, bookstores typically get those items 2 weeks after that, and they did not change their request, forgetting that this was a novel and not a graphic novel. So so bookstores will have them, as you said, on the 24th, but the ebook and the audiobook are available now, and you'll have them in a week.
And show that again, show the book. Yeah, oh, move it a little so the glare isn't down a little. Okay, there you go. Cool cover, okay.
Thank you.
Due to be published for us in 11 days, Beyond Kuiper establishes a galaxy in the future full of living, sentient beings of all kinds, but one that is closed off to Earth's humans. Essentially, we have not been invited to join the Galactic Star Alliance. This first book introduces us to two heroes, an alien named Crook, or do you say Kruk?
Kruk.
Kruk?
Correct.
Okay, whose father is one of the ruling primes of the Council of Worlds, and who is witness to a forbidden and dangerous interaction with Earth. And Bernard William Hubert is the second hero, world-renowned astrophysicist and lead scientist of Earth's seminal company of space exploration, Outer Limits. Disgraced and shunned by the scientific community after becoming the sole survivor of an explosion at another research institution, Bernard is determined to prove to all that aliens were to blame for the incident. So together with his genius son and several other close colleagues and scientists, he builds a rocket ship with an engine capable of interstellar travel to seek the source of that explosion. Matthew Medney is a New York University adjunct professor and the CEO of Heavy Metal Magazine, an established science fiction, fantasy, and horror brand, as well as the co-founder of boutique storytelling company and Hero Projects. After graduating from the University of Massachusetts Eisenberg School of Management in 2011, he quickly moved into the production of live events, over 200 across 45 different countries, concerts such as Coachella, Ultra Music Festival, Electric Daisy Carnival. I think that's where he and John first met.
It is.
And Lollapalooza. And above all, though, he is a writer and spends most of his time thinking about the unknown. John Connelly essentially builds spaceships. He's a mechanical engineer for Lockheed Martin Space, and it contributes to numerous NASA missions, including Mars 2020, Lucy. What does Lucy stand for?
Oh, it's oh gosh, it's not actually an acronym.
It's
Or
not.
it goes back to a name of somebody who invented one of the pieces of equipment.
Okay.
Yeah, that goes for it. Yeah, it's not one of those easy ones.
All right, never mind. Deep Space Gateway and Orion. When he's not involved with space and the unknown, he enjoys boulder scrambling, disc
Oh.
golf, body surfing, gardening, painting with acrylics, and gloving. What is gloving?
Gloving is a sort of performance art where you have these LED lights that are on your fingertips.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, and I wanted to make a small correction from before. Lucy is not an acronym. Lucy, though, is for Lucy the pre-human. That was the famous hominid, who was the famous archaeological discovery from a number of years back. I think she's about 2-3 million years old.
Humanity.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's right.
and it's because Lucy in archaeology is considered the first of people. This will be the first mission to the Trojan asteroids.
Okay. And also in keeping with his Irish heritage, he's also participated in the ancient sport of hurling. In a moment, I'm going to show you a video they put out on Facebook that has some reading from the book and also some visuals. But first, I wanted to encourage all of you to post any questions or comments you may have during our discussion in the chat box, and we'll try and leave a few minutes at the end to answer those questions. So let me see if I can share my screen for a second. Okay.
I know that art.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can get it to play.
Councillor Godric Adams' address to the council hall. Our mistake has always been failing to reach our potential. If humanity had focused on the stars, our new little dark age could have been avoided. The walls and ceiling were smooth, cut from pale gray and green granite that reflected light on the diverse crowd of people from every corner of the globe. His tailored paisley suit of iridescent blue matched the iceberg of his eyes. Known to be persuasive, he was pleased but not surprised by the murmurs of agreement. But one portly fellow at the edge of the room shot to his feet and screamed, "No! Absolutely not! You want to waste what few resources we have left on a pipe dream of conquering space? We need to regrow the population we've lost, not try to live in some bad science fiction novel." Godric waited for the echo of his peers, as well as the multiple translations, to subside before answering. "Yes, we've conquered. Yes, we've pillaged. There was a time it was necessary, but we've evolved. We've unified." He gestured at the insignia on each long tapestry, a dove encircling the world with its wings. "At the same time, we can't allow peace to diminish the drive toward new horizons. When we explore, when we invent, when we immerse ourselves in the new and unique, we flourish." His booming voice resonated across the sea of businessmen and women, politicians, diplomats and dignitaries, leaders, scientists, artists, and explorers. "Having been at our worst and come through, we now risk of losing the impulse to seize the future. Blessed with this second chance, let's not waste it. Let us touch the stars, not to abandon Earth, but because every child must leave home to become an adult. His challenger wasn't pleased, but conceded with a polite bow. The applause grew to a crescendo. Godric basked in the power granted by the occasion. The other councilors excitedly slammed their ceremonial gavels, signifying the start of the 19th World Council Summit.
Okay. Stop the share. Okay. All right. First, could you tell us what first gave you the idea for this book and series?
Oop.
Whoa. Hold on. Stop.
I like the music.
No. Come back up here a second.
I would just.
Stop.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
all good.
All right. I like Cat Stevens, but that just happened to be queued up after your thing.
That's fantastic.
Okay. What gave you the idea for this book and series?
I would say initially, John and I, as you had alluded to earlier, we'd met at a music festival and we instantly became friends based on our love for science and space and music and all these things. And, 4-ish years after we became friends, we had this idea of like, what if the galaxy just didn't want to talk to us? And like, what would that mean? And that was like the impetus for the whole story was, what if it's not that we can't find them? What if it's they don't want to talk to us? And that's how it all grew from that singular idea.
When you met the 4 years later and you started and you honed in on that question, where were you? What were you doing?
I had just moved to Colorado. I just left. I spent my entire life living in Connecticut, and I had just up and moved to Colorado to start over. And Matt, I think were you in LA by then?
I think when we initially started, I was getting ready to leave New York, because I think we really had the first idea in 2015, late 2015, and I moved to LA, or maybe I moved to LA in 2015. So yeah, I was already here. Sorry,
Okay.
it's been so long.
So was this over the phone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we talk almost every day, and this was over the phone.
Yeah. So hundreds of hours of phone calls and many Google Docs later, we have
I believe that, having just finished it today. Yeah. Do you think it's comparable to any other sci-fi series or space operas? If so, which ones? And if not, well, any?
I'll let John also answer, but I think, it's pretty unique in the way in which it brings you through the journey from both of the perspectives. But, we pulled a lot from our love of Roddenberry and of The Expanse and of even Star Wars, even though that's more fiction than science fiction, more fantasy. But Kuiper is at least for me, it's my love letter to Gene Roddenberry and how he used fiction to help society understand the flaws within itself. And that to me is what Beyond Kuiper is about. You'll read it, you'll enjoy it, you'll smile, you'll laugh, and then you'll think about your decisions in life and how they work alongside the characters that you're now invested into within the Kuiper universe. And that's something I thought Roddenberry did incredibly well. And I always go back to the original one, where Kirk is basically being the diplomat between the left white and right black, and the right left and the left black and white people. It's basically the same people, and they hate each other. And that, ability to talk about racism through a third party that allowed someone watching it to realize how silly it is to, hate someone for the way they look because you're all the same.
Mhm.
That to me was like the pinnacle of how fiction can influence society. And that's what I was really hoping we would do with Beyond Kuiper. John, I'll let you give your
Yeah,
side.
what were your influences, John? What are your favorites?
I mean, all of the Dune series and Frank Herbert were a huge influence, as was Ender's Game, a lot of Ray Bradbury, Harlan Ellison is a
Mhm.
very big influence. Particularly because when we first were building the story, we actually conceived of it first as really as a movie or a TV show, as a screenplay. Was how we started initially writing it, and then very quickly we realized, we wanted more than that. We wanted to tell a complete story, and I mean, there's many different aspects of familiar science fiction authors and subgenres that appear, whether it's space travel, artificial intelligence, the exploration of future dystopian societies, aliens, of course. But I like to think that our story tries to bridge a lot of them, a lot of different stories, and cover, as I say, not to put puns, but a pretty expansive tale.
Yeah, it does.
Nice pun.
So you originally envisioned it as a series when you were
Yes.
talking it through?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we originally saw it as a 5-book series, and then after we wrote book 1, we realized that the full arc for book 1 is really 2 books. We figured that the arcs that we had initially thought would be singular were all probably double. So the series that we've outlined is a 10-book series at this point, and there's 5 volumes, and each volume has 2 parts. So the first volume will be the Galactic Star Alliance and the Voyage of the Nomad, which comes out next year. And that'll be volume 1. And then every volume has its own overarching motif and arc. And then each of the books obviously have their own journeys that happen within them.
Okay. Did you have you already got the second part done?
We have what, 200 pages written, John?
About
Give or
that.
take?
Mm-hmm.
We plan to have the full first draft of book 2 done by March, get it edited down and all that fun stuff into a final draft by July, and then comes the basically from that point for the audio book, because I scored a full 22-track album for our audiobook. It's an immersive, we think of it as a 14-hour audio movie. It has voice actors, it has original score, and it has sound design.
Yeah,
So
I watched one of those videos on the making of the audio, but yeah, you're doing some intense stuff.
So Kyle Perrin, who is our incredible engineer, I mean, John and I, are the quote unquote mad scientists behind Kuiper, but like the final products that you guys see is because we have an amazing team behind us. And, UT, who does all the art in the book, which is what's used in that video that we just played. He lives in Turkey, and he is just incredible. And he has been our full-time artist now for almost 2 years. And he just draws Kuiper art. And we just have endless art to pull from for us to like help visualize the ideas that
Wow.
we've created. And then Kyle, who's been one of my best friends for years, is one of the most amazing audio engineers in the game. He edits and produces podcasts for a living, and then he co-writes all the original music. He narrates and he sound designs all of the Kuiper audiobooks.
Wow.
And he's just incredible with it. So we write, that video.
So he does the narration for all the voices, all the different characters?
So what we just played, that little snippet you played is just a direct pull from chapter 4.
Yeah.
And all those different voices you heard are Kyle. He's modulating his voice with his different plugins and sound engineering tools, which is really amazing. And yeah, he's a vision in and of himself. But getting the audio book for me I always go back to Harry Potter. I mean, for anyone watching, I got Elder Wand and I got the Deathly Hallows, and
Yes.
I was, enamored with J.K. Rowling and the Wizarding World, and Jim Dale. The audiobooks were incredible. Those audiobooks were my gold standard, and I wanted to beat that. That was like what I was like, we need to do better than the Jim Dale audiobooks. And to me, the only thing that would do better is add music and add sound design, because we can't do as good of voices as him, because he is like, how do we supplement his incredible tonalities with other things that make you feel like you're in a movie? Because his voice aside, what the Kuiper audiobook does that I think we achieved, which the Rowling audiobooks definitely did, which is you could close your eyes while listening to them and you could see the movie. That's what we were hoping to do. Is what the audiobook is allowing someone to just close their eyes and see it. And obviously, we want people to go to the bookstore and buy the hard copy, because that's what it's all about. But with the audiobook, you can listen along while you read. And, for us, when it came out, Audible was kind enough to put us right next to Rowling's new book, Ichabod, which was pretty surreal to see our names next to her name, being that the Wizarding World was definitely an inspiration to the way that we write. Because and not to ramble too much, but Tolkien and Roddenberry and a lot of other people, though they wrote hi-fi, wrote at a very advanced English language, so that you had to really be able to comprehend it. And something that I loved about Rowling, which I know John does too, that we kept very close to us, was even though Rowling's reading level is high, I think it's like a 6th, 7th, or 8th grade reading level, the way in which it's written, a 2nd grader could read it. And the digestibility of those books, and the elevation of the type of language was something that I thought was an incredible juxtaposition that made those books even more magical. And I think we were able to achieve that to an extent, obviously not as well as she did, because she is the master, but that ability to write something that's compelling and something that's really easy to understand, but also elevate your cognitive thinking is what I think Kuiper did.
And let's talk about that title. How early in the process did you fix on the title?
Ooh, pretty early.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Did it come before the story?
No, after the story, but long before we had the first draft complete.
Yeah.
When we were still in the concept stage.
If my memory, and you were asking questions, Tanya, that we haven't thought about in a long time.
Yeah, no one's asked us that.
I'm trying to think. Was the original title the Galactic Star Alliance, and then we realized that was a volume title and not?
No, the opposite. It was the original title was going to be Voyage of the Nomad, or I think Beyond Kuiper was just going to be the book title.
Right. Was it always that? We never deviated from that, right? That was
but then we elevated it to the series title, and Galactic Star Alliance then became the book title. Because I think at first it was just going to be Beyond Kuiper, Voyage of the Nomad. And then when we realized that initial story was so large, we needed to split it into 2 books. It became.
So the series title is Beyond Kuiper.
Kuiper, yes.
Mm-hmm. And okay, tell us, for those, any of us, if in case, I mean, I had to look it up, but tell us the significance of Kuiper.
I'll let the scientists do that.
So Beyond Kuiper is a large group belt of asteroids and comets that are remnants and leftovers from the formation of the solar system. Now we have our main asteroid belt, which is between the orbit of Mars and Jupiter. The Kuiper belt lies much further out, starting from the edge of the orbit of Neptune and continuing out for many astronomical units. It's huge, it's very far away, and we chose the title because, one, it's a symbolic representation of sort of the edge of the solar system, and in a lot of ways, the edge of explorable space in terms of people and in terms of the instruments that we've sent out. And 2, because we thought that in our story, if there was an alien presence that was watching us and our solar system, that would be where they would be hiding.
Right. Okay.
And beyond Kuiper is the rest of the galaxy. So the
True. Yeah.
is beyond Kuiper insinuates that what lies beyond what we know.
Exactly. It's the unknown.
Yes.
All right. How did you and John work together to author this first book? Like your writing process, how you divided the responsibilities, the writing or the content creation?
So I would say first we have to thank Google, right?
Yes.
This book does not get made if there's no such thing as Google Docs.
Beyond Kuiper brought to you by Google Docs.
If we had to use Word or Pages and write something and then email it and keep track of drafts, it for sure would have been a disaster. This book would have been horrifying. The ability that you could work in the document together and see what each other are writing and editing made it really fluid. For those that don't know, in Google Docs, you can share the same thing. So every time someone wrote something, the other person could just write over it, and then we could see the difference. And it's always just in one place. So it made it really easy for me to write a paragraph or a chapter, John to go over it, make his notes in that same document, never having to email anything, but us being able to see both of them and then choosing the pieces of each that we wanted to put in, which made it really smooth for us on the creation side. But on the writing itself, and if you read the book, which we hope you do, we think that you actually wouldn't even tell who wrote each chapter, because our process was pretty regimented in the sense that, at first we would create a chapter outline, and then we would go to war with each other on that, from me pushing the boundaries of what science is and pushing it into fiction, and John pulling back into ensuring the science was real, because that is the biggest piece of our book, is that the science is the realest science you'll ever find in sci-fi. And that is something that I'm very strong about. A lot of our reviews, Screen Rant, actually said that the science of our spaceship is the most theoretically accurate science ever used for an intergalactic spacefaring vessel in fiction. And that was really important to us. We always joke saying that the book has to pass the Bill Nye test. That if because when we started it, the movie Gravity came out. And if any of you've seen Gravity,
Yeah.
you know that the scientific community destroyed the science of this book. And it gave us nightmares that we could put our soul into something and then be shunned by the scientific community. So we really made sure that the science was great. But after we went through our war rooms and after we settled on something, we would we would really just be kind of like a vote, like, hey, do you want to tackle this or should I tackle this? And then we would each write a couple of chapters, and then we would hand it over. The other person would write over that chapter, and so on and so forth. And we did that process for the whole book, and obviously into books 2 and beyond, where one person writes, the other person writes over it. We figure out what combination of those two things is the best representation, and then that's the chapter.
And did you have an editor at the end?
Oh,
yeah. So after
yes.
Initially, after we made the outline, and then we effectively chose to divide up chapters. About half of them Matt initially wrote, half of them I initially wrote, and then we sent them back.
Let me interrupt you 1 second. Did one of you deal with the alien world and the other one with the Earth, or did you both take turns on both?
I would say it was not a 50-50. So on the human side stuff, I would probably say on those chapters was a 65-35 me, and on the alien was probably a 65-35 John at the start. But both of us then went into the other person's writing and changed a bunch of stuff and reworked it. But John tackled a lot of the alien stuff because my brain can't compute metric system to is insane. So for those listening, John created an entire units of measure, periodic table system, the whole kit and caboodle of intergalactic science.
Yeah, for example, John, what's up? Was it a prike?
Yes.
What's that equivalent to?
A prike is equivalent to 16 8 hours, I believe
Okay.
is what it is.
So,
That's
yeah.
insane.
So
That off the top of your head,
So
by
the
way.
aliens, when they're talking about time, they're talking about Prikes and then other.
Pikes, strikes, Nola
Right.
Pikes. So
Yeah.
in the alien system, we had, like the metric system handles units of distance and units of mass, it's powers of 10.
Okay. Okay. And I interrupted you before, which you maybe don't
No,
remember.
it was just about, well, you were asking us about if we had an editor. And so after the long initial, to get to the first draft was Matt and I writing these episodes, writing these chapters, handing them off to each other, going back and forth. And then before we went to an external editor, Matt read through the entire first draft, did an entire set of edits. We went over them together, decided what to incorporate, not incorporate it, gave it to me. I reread through the entire book again, did an entire set of my edits. Again, by that point, that might have been when we physically went to meet up in California.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
We did. So throughout the whole book, we've only met. I mean, obviously, we've hung out other times. We've only met up once to go through the book before we handed it off. Then after he did his edit and I did mine, we handed it off to our editor, Stefan Petruccia, who's an incredible writer in his own right. And Stefan has written Captain America prose and Deadpool prose and a ton of other stuff within our world. And it was pretty, and he, went in and took our 397 page book and turned it into a 293 page book. So he did exactly his job.
Mm-hmm.
It was very painful to watch, but in the end, it was definitely the right decisions. It was one of those things that going into handing it to him, we both knew that we were going to give up about 15% of the book in edits, but it didn't sting any less, even though we knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were your biggest challenges in creating this story? What was the biggest challenge for you, John?
Ooh. I would say the biggest challenge was once we realized that we needed to split the book in half, how we were going to still tell a good self-contained story for the first half of it. Because we didn't want to just split it in some arbitrary point and leave everybody with, no sets of closure.
I think
would say
you did a good job where you split it. That's
I
good.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
And you, Matt, what was the biggest challenge for you?
I would say it was the balance between hard science and the fantastical. Really making sure that we created enough fantasy within fiction that the book felt exciting, but never doing anything that was incomprehensible from a scientific standpoint. A perfect example is you meet this species called the Kalayans. They're a sentient robotic species. And what you learn a lot more about them in book 2, but we wrote, and we'll get to this after, but we wrote 300 pages of lore before we ever wrote a page of the book. I had this whole saying, if we're going to write this novel, I want to write a 9th grade history lessons worth of history before we write the novel. And that's what we did. And it was amazing.
It was about I want to say a couple months into when we actually started writing. And then Matt told me, he's like, we need to hard stop on any actual writing the book, or we're going to destroy ourselves with plot holes by how broad our tale is.
So now every character's great-great-grandfather, we know exactly what they've done and sooner. It's pretty crazy. But this specific thing, these sentient robots called the Kalayans, they have this amazing backstory, and I won't get into all of it, but their robotic shell that they live in is made of this thing called Kalayan steel. And Kalayan steel to us is our vibranium or antimantium. It's our strongest metal in the known universe. And I had this crazy idea that a neutron star would be the core of that planet, and that's what they would siphon off to then create the metal from. And, I thought that was just really cool science fiction because I watched one too many episodes of How the Universe Works. I was like, neutron stars are cool. And John then, had his scientific meltdown where he's like, a teaspoon of a neutron star weighs more than our sun. So that's not going to happen. And and then I'll let him explain. He read through journals, and here, explain how you brought that back into science.
Yeah, so Matt proposed that, and I was instantly furious. Mostly just because, like he said, if we want to balance between science and the fantastical, he would come to me and be like, okay, prove to me that nowhere in the universe this phenomenon hasn't existed. And I was like, okay, that's fair. However, given like a substantial amount of known theoretical physics, I feel like a neutron star is so dense and the gravity is so strong that any normal matter that's near it would just collapse into it and make a bigger neutron star, or eventually make a black hole. So that's when I was like, planet's not going to work. So he was like, okay, find a way to make this work. So I was like, all right, well, what's less dense than a neutron star? A white dwarf star. However, the same issue, like normal rock that's on the surface of a planet doesn't really interact with a white dwarf star very well. It would just make everything explode. And if you took then he was like, okay, well, what if you took a small portion of the white dwarf star? And that was how they ended up, that's what made the metal. And I was like, well, except if you took a small portion of the white dwarf star, like if you took a handful of it, it only stays that special white dwarf star matter because of the intense pressure and gravity. And so if you took it and just walked into my house right now, you just blow off a chunk of the North American continent. So I was like, okay, I still want to try to make this work. I don't really know how. And then I dug deeper, and in theoretical physics, there's something called a black dwarf, which is a white dwarf that is so old that eventually it'll cool off and crystallize, and so it'll be stable and inert. But the theory is that it would take most of the lifespan of the universe it would take that long for them to cool down. And so then I was like, okay, you've got this great idea. The only problem is it doesn't exist yet. So then we came up with an idea that some vast uber alien race in the past had built a Dyson sphere around a star, accelerated the time inside the Dyson sphere to collapse the star, turn it into a black dwarf, and then they blew it up to get the pieces, and shards of it drifted across the galaxy one day, slammed into the planet that later on became the homeworld of the Kalayans.
Okay, excellent.
And that amount of detail in science is within every single facet of every single concept within the book.
Okay, but I do want to ask a question about that with all the detail. Because I read an advanced copy of this in PDF form on my Kindle, or on my phone, actually. And
Wow.
I enjoyed the story a lot, but all those footnotes on almost every page just annoyed me. I just went right past them because I wanted to get on with the story. Do you have all those footnotes in the finished novel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you don't need them to enjoy the novel. They are there for
science nerds.
For science nerds. Exactly. Yes. You definitely do not need to read them to get the experience. However, we both of us read the Tolkien's
you read this, Myron. I read all the appendices.
So we were like, instead of creating other books with all this information, we're just going to put them in the footer, and you can read them if you want. You don't have to. They are really great for after you're done reading it, and then you start thinking about what you read, and you're like, that was an interesting idea. Oh, let me find where that is. In the audiobook, they're at the end of every chapter, and they're skippable. Again, they're not needed to get the full experience. They are there to.
They certainly do fill it out, though. Yeah, yes. They give you a lot of information. I could tell you did a huge amount of world building.
So Tanya, the footnotes they've been pretty polarizing. I'll put it that way. People tend to either say that they could really do without them, or people have loved them a lot. Part of it was, we wanted to tell this expansive story about so many different worlds, and setting up a future that's quite different from our own. We also didn't want to drown a reader in exposition. We wanted to tell this tight, focused, engaging story, but still give you this big world. And so when we were writing our codex, really our series Bible initially, we have, what you said, about 300 pages, Matt, of material. And originally we had thought about actually releasing that codex as a separate published item, as an accompaniment to the book. But then we realized that it would be, it wouldn't be that useful. If you're reading one book to then be reading it, put it down, go to a completely other one if you want references, versus we could find a way to put, strip down the codex to the core supplemental information that we wanted to add and incorporate that back into the tale.
And one thing I just want to add to that, Tanya, is, when something that's very important to me is when you're creating art, that you create it for yourself and hope that other people see what you wanted, and you don't create for others. And for me and John, something that bugs us is when we don't know the answers to someone. And like, did they just make it up on the spot and didn't really think of that decision? Or was there actually a line of logic to how they got there? And we wanted to make sure that anybody that was like us and for us could see that everything had a line of logic to it.
Okay. Now, there are so many different sentient species that you introduce in this book. But I like I said, I think I told you in advance, I really enjoyed I was intrigued by the Kalayans and the Ra'atiki. You've talked about the Kalayans a bit with their semi-metallic shell.
Well, no, they're sentient machines.
Sentient machines. Okay, talk about them in particular with their characteristics, their roles, and their abilities.
So the Kalayans, John, you
no, I don't.
One of you take one, take the other.
Well, John, why don't you start with the Ratiki, because that's your baby.
Okay, so the Ratiki started as, we have primes, which are the highest level officials in the galactic government, and we wanted them to, they have guards. You imagine, even in a peaceful society, you still have some form of protection. And we had this idea that we wanted them to have these invisible, kind of uber soldier, incredibly loyal guards to them that were really scary looking, which was kind of also played into the fact that they would be invisible literally all the time and always with the prime. And so in the story, like everything that's happening with these characters, like there are 6 Ratiki that are around. You just never see them and never hear them unless something catastrophic is happening. And
even when they go to the bathroom.
So,
I know.
Well, that's what I say. That's why there's 6. So at some point, one of them can rotate in shifts. We also wanted to give this sense of a race that is sentient but different enough from a lot of the other races that they don't really interact in the same social and emotional way. We wanted them to be like a force that cannot be like corrupted or manipulated or undermined, and that's what makes them the perfect guards for these top level members of government. And they're go ahead.
Jump in real quick to John's point. When we were creating all these aliens, and John did do a lion's share of the alien creation, it was really important to him that it was anti-Star Wars. And what I mean by that is, Star Wars, almost every species is a thread of humanity within them, and you can always relate to every single species. And John was very adamant about creating a diverse biological spectrum of species that don't necessarily have any human characteristics and that are anti-human. And the Ratiki and the Osani are 2 species that John created that were that don't have the same paradigms of humanity that you care about certain things, but they have their own set of codes that those species really operate through.
Okay, and then the Kalayans, what's their role? Or what makes them different from?
So the Kalayans were, I think, my favorite thing that I've created, and the Kalayans to me was, I wanted to create a species that did the opposite of what every machine sentient being has done in science fiction, which is rebel against a hateful creator, right? Terminator, Skynet, all of these things are Ultron, are sentient machines that rebel against their hateful creators. And we pose the question, how would a sentient machine operate if its creators were a loving mother? And that is the impetus of the Kalayans. And their whole backstory is that on Kalaya, there was the sentient biological species called Kalayans. And they created a species called the Kalayan 2s, which were the sentient machines. And Kalaya is 2 times the mass of Earth. And what that means is that the pressure to leave the atmosphere is going to be greater than on Earth by magnitudes. So that species evolved its artificial intelligence program much faster than it evolved its space program, because the thrust needed to get into the atmosphere would be significantly greater. So once they created their Kalayan, their Kalayan machine robots, those robots helped the biological species get to space because they were loving parents. Unfortunately, when they got into space and they pierced the atmosphere, it unleashed a biological toxin that killed the biological species. And in a last-ditch effort of unity and hope, the Kalayan ones built a machine that allowed the remaining biological Kalayans to transcend and merge their consciousness with their machine counterparts. So the Kalayan robotic overlords are a combination of their biological parents and their machine offspring. And that is the Kalayans that we see in our book, which are benevolent and eternal and compassionate.
And extremely, extremely powerful, but they never use it. You know, they are also a big neutral arbitrating force within the galaxy. There's a Kalayan High Council which will deal in like arbitrative matters and disputes within the government.
And that will be in future books.
Yeah, I mean, even in this book, I mean, you see some interaction with them.
Yeah.
It's really, you know, they kind of look at the rest of the galaxy with interest and curiosity, but from the lens of being a species that, as Matt said, is effectively eternal. And so time for them means really nothing, as do, like, you know, internal squabbles and the day-to-day struggles of most of the other aliens.
Because I get the feeling that both of these species are going to play prominent roles in future books in this series.
Very, very prominent. And for anyone listening, watching, who's a big Star Trek nerd, you know, a lot of their benevolence to time is pulled from my love of Q and how Q looks at time from Star Trek. And you know, the idea that in the Galactic Star Alliance, I believe it's chapter 14, one of the other species asks the Kalayan why they don't try to take over. And the sentiment is, well, we can just wait until your civilization is long gone.
Yeah.
And that is the idea, is that they could take over, they could Skynet, rebel, Terminator style, but they just don't see a reason to, because no one's harmed them. They don't care to harm anyone, and they know they'll be around millions of years after this iteration of a galactic government is long gone.
Okay. By the way, if any of you have questions who are watching, go ahead and put them in the chat room. I know I was going to keep this to an hour, but we may go over just a little. If you have
That's
questions.
quite all right.
I just have 2 questions left.
Sure.
So we appear to have, I love the dichotomy of these 2 father-son relationships. You've got Kruk and his father, who's, I can't remember how he pronounces.
Bohr.
What?
Bohr. B-O-R. Bohr.
Bohr. Oh, I was. Oh.
Oh, his full name is Kruk Bohr.
Yes. That's what I was. Yeah. And then you've got Bernard and his son Isaac. I imagine in a future book, Isaac will be going up into space at some point. Am I wrong?
In a future book, at some point, you are
Okay.
not wrong.
Okay. But it's cool that you've got these two. You start out, you're in space with among these aliens, and you learn about this relationship, and then you go to Earth and you hear that there's been this big explosion, and you learn about Bernard with his son, who's a genius, who helps design the rocket ship that they can finally use, the Nomad. Um, So, are these guys going to be heroes throughout the series?
Are who? Fathers or the sons?
Thus, both, I guess. I don't.
I would say, and John, correct me if you think I'm misspeaking with this, but I think when we created that, whether it was intentional or subliminal, it was based off of, there's this amazing galactic battle and war and seeking of justice in Star Wars. But at the end of the day, it comes back to a redemption arc of a father trying to be a better father to his son, right? That, like, through all of Star Wars, that's all it is. It's Vader's redemption arc.
Star Wars has terrible parents.
Terrible parents, but similarly, at the end of the day, with the Galactic Star Alliance and with the Beyond Kuiper series, we're following these two parents and how their parenting and how their decisions affect the future generations and affect the way in which their offspring will look at the decisions that face them coming up. And that, to me, is a timeless concept that I think is always fun to really explore.
I would also say too, to explore in two different ways how, the things that our parents ask of us, and what, as I'd say in some ways coming of age for both of the younger characters, and like coming to understand the decisions that their parents make, and but then they get to make their own decisions on if they thought those decisions were good or bad.
Uh-huh. Are you going to have any major female characters? Because you got father sons, and I know you've got, what's her name? Let's talk about the bad guy in this.
Oh, Diane. Yes. So to answer your question, actually, I would say that what it really is the characters, the prominent female characters you have met. It's really as we have part 1 and part 2, we will flip and we will focus significantly more on Angelica, on Lisa, on Medina, on Valora, the Fandaxian. She has actually a very prominent role. I do agree, like you're not the first to say to us or to note the focus based on gender of characters for this first one, and that was not intentional. We just really as the story was building and the characters that we created. I also think, just from a personal standpoint, I can get inside the head of a guy.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of strong female characters, from Medina to Aubrey, and Aubrey Gates, our historian, is an incredibly strong female character. And while the story arcs in the first book really do focus on those father-son paradigms, the overarching book is really about the crew of the intergalactic mission, and that is, as far as I can remember, pretty evenly split with 6 and 6. And yeah, the character Valora, who works with Odion Speck, our main antagonist, has a massive role in the story. And her arc goes from loyal follower to general, and we thought it was important to show that that growth for the character, rather than start her in this key role, but show how she grew and gain the respect and the confidence to be the character that we see her being in the future books.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to that. And I don't see any, again, you can order this at the link that I put in the chat box. And I will send all of you links to the recording of this and the Matt's website and the buy link for the book after this. So thank you, Matt and John, for this fascinating discussion around your new book. And
Thank you.
So thanks to all of you who joined us today, and stay safe, stay well, and have a great evening.
You too.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.